So how many people actually cursed Percy when he was fighting in the forest of the Arai, and is it possible to track down where all of his injuries came from? In the House of Hades, while Percy and Annabeth are in Tartarus, they encounter a forest full of curse demons called Arai, and it's explained that each of the Arai is a manifestation of a curse that has been placed on whoever kills the demon. So the first time Percy kills one of them, he's pierced through the sides of his chest by an invisible arrow, since in the Battle of the Labyrinth, this is how he killed Geryon. And in Geryon's final moments, he cursed Percy and created an Arai. Throughout these next few chapters, we get a few specific confirmations that we'll be talking about, but some of the curses that Percy suffers are a bit more ambiguous, and the identity of the culprit isn't actually named. So today, we're going to comb through these chapters for every curse that Percy and Annabeth suffered, and see if we can't figure out exactly how many people cursed them, and see exactly who they are. We even think we figured out who cursed Percy's eye to twitch, but we'll get to that in a minute, so let's get going. As we mentioned, the first curse Percy endures comes from Geryon, but the second curse is actually inflicted on Annabeth when she is ambushed from behind. She flips an Arai over and crushes it with a rock, only to go blind, and the Arai confirms that Polyphemus cursed her for gouging his eye all the way back in the Sea of Monsters. She turned herself invisible and called herself Nobody, and so she gets to bear the curse of invisible enemies just like Polyphemus did. Fortunately, Bob is able to press the Arai back, so when they point out that Percy is the one who wiped Bob's memory, he stands aside and doesn't do anything to help. Percy runs off, and the chapter confirms that he cut down a dozen Arai, but Percy doesn't feel the curses right away, so it seems like this line might be referring to some benign curses that come from people that might not actually see him as an enemy, just as an annoyance. We know that the Arai enjoy toying with Percy and Annabeth. Percy himself calls this out after Annabeth kills her second. So it makes sense that they'd start out with curses levied by someone who Percy beat in Capture the Flag, or an old classmate that watched him blow up the school bus in 4th grade. But as Percy fights on, they get much worse. He eventually decides that it's better to cut down trees to inadvertently crush the demons rather than cut them down firsthand, but this only buys him a few more seconds before he comes to a cliff. This is when Annabeth blindly judo flips another Arai and endures the curse of Calypso, which, side note, we have a full video on why Calypso cursed Percy in the first place that adds a lot of context to this moment, so we highly recommend that you go check out that video as well. What's important to remember about the Calypso curse, however, is that Calypso is still alive, so this curse is proof that the person who issued the curse does not have to do so with their dying breath. These curses can come from people that are still alive, and this is going to be an important detail in just a minute. Annabeth is then cursed to believe that Percy abandoned her, and in order to save her, he charges and kills them all. And this is where we get into the bulk of this idea, because he suffers several curses back to back. In order to protect Annabeth, he cuts them to shreds, and this is a direct quote from the book. Quote, "Each time a demon disintegrated, Percy felt a heavier sense of dread as another curse settled on him. Some were harsh and painful, a stabbing in the gut, a burning sensation like he was being blasted by a blowtorch. Some were subtle, a chill in the blood, an uncontrollable tick in his right eye. Seriously, who curses you with their dying breath and says, 'I hope your eye twitches'?" And this is the passage that we're going to dive headfirst into. So let's start with the stabbing in the gut. The likeliest candidate for this curse is the Minotaur, who Percy stabbed in the torso not once, but twice. The first time was all the way back in The Lightning Thief, when he ripped the Minotaur's horn off and stabbed him before entering camp. But in The Last Olympian, he actually kills the Minotaur in a very similar way. Instead of his horn, however, Percy splits the Minotaur's axe on the Williamsburg Bridge, and he posts it on the railing as the Minotaur charges. He then impales himself on his own axe, and Percy throws him into the river. And in most instances, when Percy describes the way he fights, he prefers cuts and slashes over stabs. So this is our top suspect right now. Next, we see that he feels a burning sensation, like he was being blasted with a blowtorch. Percy, being a son of Poseidon, typically doesn't use fire, so the instances where he burns someone aren't as common. Our initial belief is that this curse was levied by someone who was on board the Princess Andromeda when Percy and Beckendorf blew it out of the water. Literally. We know that Percy and Beckendorf were caught, so there are plenty of monsters and demigods who knew that he was responsible. It's just a matter of wondering who survived long enough to curse him to burn. We know that some demigods are harder to burn than others. As the Telekines say, Percy himself doesn't catch fire easily since he's a son of Poseidon. It's perfectly reasonable that a child of Hephaestus or Hecate or some fire-resistant monster survived long enough to suffer the burns from the Greek fire and curse Percy as a result before the ship went down. This is probably Percy's most direct use of fire to kill enemies, so we believe that the likeliest case is that someone on the Princess Andromeda cursed Percy as they were burning. So now let's talk about some of the more subtle curses, such as the chill in his blood. We don't see any instances of Percy freezing water or enemies, but we do see instances of him using his power in winter environments, where the water would be naturally cold. We know that in the Son of Neptune, he went up to Alaska in order to free the chained god Thanatos in order to restore the force of death. When he's fighting off Polybides and his army of undead Roman legionnaires, he creates a hurricane and a tidal wave that sweeps across the Hubbard Glacier, drowning out the army and allowing Percy, Frank, and Hazel to get away. This water would naturally be freezing, but we don't think that this is the case where it came from because of how subtle and benign it is. Option 1 is that the curse is lessened because most of the enemies were undead and aren't as harshly affected by temperature, or option 2 is that we're looking in the wrong place. Our second idea is that this might have actually been Talia's doing, and she either forgot about it or she didn't realize the implications, because after all, how could she know? In the Titan's Curse, we learned that the magic barrier surrounding camp can mitigate winter weather, but they don't use it to its fullest extent. They still allow the camp to be cool and let a small winter flurry in, so camp conditions are still cold even if they're not as cold as the outside world. When Percy and Talia attempt to co-captain the Capture the Flag team, however, they butt heads, and eventually get into a fight where they lash out at one another. Talia throws a lightning strike, and Percy soaks her in creek water, which would still be freezing. And since tensions were high, she probably cursed him or cursed at him while they were fighting. We know that Talia has a bit of a temper, but obviously she and Percy are on good terms now, which is why we don't think that the curse was nearly as bad as it could have been. James intrusion. Option 3. People will often say they get a chill or like they get goosebumps when they see something particularly creepy or scary. Percy's known for being very intimidating while he fights. So if we take like Battle Manhattan, he creates a hurricane around himself while he's fighting. If he killed somebody in that moment instead of because it doesn't necessarily have to be the way that they died, because we've established that Calypso and potentially even with Talia with this cursed him while they're still alive. So it's possible that like a chill ran down your spine or your blood runs cold. It could be an analogy to like that or akin to that, and that he just scared the shit out of somebody right before they died. We think that this chill of the blood curse was a momentary surge of frustration from Talia during this creek fight, but the effects are mitigated due to the fact that Talia doesn't actually feel this way about him, and they've mended their relationship in recent years. This then brings us to the last curse in the quote, which is the infamous eye twitch curse, and we think that something similar happened here. We believe that this curse was much worse, but was then mitigated, and it seems likely that this curse was levied by none other than Ethan Nakamura. Percy and Ethan were at odds throughout the latter half of the Battle of the Labyrinth and most of the Last Olympian, but Ethan's entire motivation centered around balance and justice. He believed he was acting fairly, and he got this lesson when he met his mother Nemesis. She demanded his left eye in exchange for the ability to make a difference, and this is where Ethan learned about sacrifice and balance. He wanted Percy to see things the way that he did, and to understand why Luke was doing what he was doing, which Percy did get to a point. What we believe happened is that Ethan wasn't hoping for Percy to lose an eye because he was vengeful. He wanted Percy to pay the price for enlightenment, for the gods to take an eye from him so that he finally understood. We believe that he wanted Percy to bear the brunt of a sacrifice, but we know that much like Talia, Ethan and Percy were eventually able to take a step closer to the center. On Mount Olympus, Percy is able to show Ethan that complete destruction does not equate to balance, and that true balance can only be achieved as long as Olympus is left standing. Ethan then draws his sword and attacks Kronos, only to be impaled on a shard of his own blade. But he does end his life on the side of the Olympians. He asks Percy to make sure that they get respect before falling from the Olympian throne room, so we believe that this eye tick curse might be a remnant of an old curse that Ethan levied against Percy, which was then mitigated by the fact that he switched sides in the end. He didn't view Percy as an enemy when he died, so it's likely that Percy could have lost an eye in this moment if Ethan had died while he was still an enemy. All of these curses pile on top of him until one Arai attacks and bites into his thigh. He screams and stabs it, only to be overcome by his final curse, the death of Phineas from the Son of Neptune. In the Son of Neptune, he challenges Phineas to a game where they could each drink a vial of Gorgon's blood, and one would be healed and one would die. Percy, however, knew that he could never beat the plot armor allegations, so he prayed to Gaia to keep him alive, knowing that she had a plan for him. The only reason he was able to remain alive is because he understood how poorly he had treated Bob, and he apologized. But even Bob was not able to completely cure him, just stabilize him. Over the years, Percy's killed a lot of monsters, and this entire scene was the culmination of everything he had done until now. What's interesting, however, is that it's also a redemption story, not just in terms of his relationship with Bob, but with the curses as well. We know that he does his best to make amends with Calypso once he gets out, and we know that he begins to treat Bob better. But if this theory is true, Then he also mended his relationship with Talia, and at least in part with Ethan Nakamura. Percy is a character who is inherently loyal and cares about those around him, even if he's not necessarily on their side. He'll always do the best that he can for as many people as he can, even if this scene shows some of his shortcomings. It also demonstrates that he's human. He can't do it all, despite his best efforts, but he learns and tries to make amends wherever possible. And if this scene is actually depicting curses from Talia and Ethan, then it shows us that mistakes can be fixed and relationships can be repaired. But that's our take on all of the curses that Percy suffered at the hands of the Arai. But be sure to let us know what you guys think. Did we miss something, or do you think we got any of these wrong? As always, we love this series, we love talking about the series, and we love engaging with all of you who have found us. We wouldn't keep going if it weren't for you, so we want to take a moment and thank all of you for the support. So take care, my friends, and we'll see you in the next one.